This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9. English news as it should be.
Indeed, you are watching News 9. This is Monday morning. I'm Karthik Malhotra, and thank you so much for tuning in to the morning brief at 9. We will be bringing you all the latest global as well as Indian business and economy stories right here. See you in just a bit. Watching Morning Brief at 9. Good morning, I'm Karthik Malhotra. Let's bring you all the top stories that we're tracking for you this Monday morning. After giving full operational freedom to the armed forces, Prime Minister Modi first meets the naval chief on Saturday and then the Indian Air Force chief yesterday to discuss preparedness. Meanwhile, on his global trip, Piyush Goyal, Commerce and Industry Minister, meets Belgium to discuss ways to boost trade and investment for India. However, before heading to Brussels, Piyush Goyal in UK met with Jonathan Reynolds. There seem to be some unresolved issues that may delay India-UK trade pacts. And even as Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal heads back to India, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has headed to Milan, Italy for the 58th Asian Development Bank annual meet. Bilateral meetings with Japan and Italy on the horizon too. Meanwhile, South Korean electronics major Samsung has moved court challenging a $500 million penalty that India has imposed on the electronics major. And BluSmart drivers, as many as 10,000 of them who have not been paid their dues ever since the electric taxi company shut its operations about 2 weeks ago, now stand in protest over unpaid dues. And Chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, the Oracle of OMAHA, has announced that he will retire end of this year. Oil prices have dropped more than $2 per barrel as OPEC Plus accelerate output hikes. And there can't be a Monday morning without Donald Trump. Donald Trump announces now a 100% tariff on movies not made in the United States of America. Let's start with the latest developments over the weekend. The Indian Air Force Chief, Air Chief Marshal A.P. Singh, met Prime Minister Narendra Modi yesterday amid heightened tensions with Pakistan, which has threatened nuclear retaliation to any Indian military action following the April 22nd Pahalgam terrorist attack that claimed at least 26 lives. Now remember, Modi's discussions with the Air Chief came a day after meeting between the Prime Minister and the Navy Chief, Admiral Dinesh K. Tripathi, who briefed him on naval preparedness along critical lines in the Arabian Sea. Now remember, just last week, Modi, after meeting the three service chiefs, had asserted that the armed forces had complete operational freedom to decide on the mode, targets and timing of India's response to the terrorist attacks in Pahalgam. Now, Pakistan's ambassador to Russia, meanwhile, has warned that Islamabad might use its full military arsenal, including nuclear weapons, if attacked by India. Now, at an event yesterday, Rajnath Singh, the defense minister, said that it is his responsibility to give a befitting reply to those who dare to attack India. And this is exactly what he said, and I quote, "I want to assure you that under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, what you desire will certainly happen." That's the quote from Defense Minister Rajnath Singh. Well, the Defense Research and Development Organization, or the DRDO, has also successfully carried out the maiden flight trials of a stratospheric airship platform that is being developed to boost the military surveillance capabilities. Now, the DRDO said that the prototype flight was a milestone towards the achievement of lighter-than-air, high-altitude, unmanned platform systems that can remain airborne for long periods of stratospheric heights carrying instruments. India and Belgium have discussed ways to boost and the bilateral trade as well as foster industrial collaboration and deepen investments in strategic sectors such as semiconductors, clean energy, defense production, as well as pharmaceuticals. Now, remember, the two sides also reviewed progress in the India-European Union Free Trade Agreement negotiations, which both parties are recognizing as a means to address tariff and non-tariff barriers and enhance market access. Now, the deliberations were held during the visit of Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal with the Belgian Minister for Defense and Foreign Trade, Theo Franken, and Minister President of the Flanders region, Matthias Dijpendale, in Brussels last week. Now, as per Commerce Ministry, the discussions highlight growing economic synergies and focus on scaling bilateral trade, fostering industrial collaboration and deepening investments in strategic sectors. These include semiconductors, clean energy, defense production, as well as pharmaceuticals. Now, Belgium, remember, is India's fifth largest trading partner within the European Union. Belgium's bilateral trade with India is as high as over $15 billion for the gone-by year 2023-24. Meanwhile, foreign direct investment by Belgian companies into India has totaled over or just about near about $4 billion during the 2020 to 2024 period. But this included a solid 40% increase in growth at $1.1 billion in just last year alone. And let's stay with India's efforts to forge global partnerships, and let's shift focus from the European Union to the United Kingdom. Now, the conclusion of negotiations for 3 pacts, including the proposed free trade agreement between India and the UK, may take some more time as both sides are yet to resolve certain outstanding issues. This as per sources who told the Press Trust of India. Now, there are a total of 4 to 5 issues in the 3 pacts that the two countries are negotiating as per the report. Now, the 3 pacts under negotiation are: number 1, the free trade agreement, the India-UK FTA; number 2, the bilateral investment agreement, also referred to as the BIT; and finally, the Social Security Pact, officially dubbed as the Double Contribution Convention Agreement. Now, the progress of talks were recently reviewed during meetings between Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal and UK's Secretary of State for Business and Trade, Jonathan Reynolds, last week in London. But certain critical issues are still there, and more meetings would likely happen as per the report. Now, issues that may need some more discussions included the sunset clause in the BIT, or the Bilateral Investment Treaty. Plus, there's UK's new carbon tax, as well as the issue of data localization. The two sides were preparing to announce the closure of these negotiations on April 29th in London, but differences cropped up at the last minute. Now, earlier on February 24th, remember, Goyal and Reynolds had announced the resumption of negotiations for the proposed FTA between the two countries. The talks resumed after a gap of over 8 months. Now, remember, so far 14 rounds of talks have been completed, which were launched on Jan 13th, 2022. Now, in FTAs, remember, two countries either eliminate or significantly reduce customs duties on maximum goods traded between them. They also ease norms for promoting trade in services and bilateral investments. The Indian industry is demanding greater access for its skilled professionals from sectors like IT and healthcare in the UK market, besides market access for several goods at nil customs duty. Now, what is it that the UK wants? Well, on the other hand, the UK is seeking a significant cut in import duties on goods such as Scotch whisky, electric vehicles, lamb meat, chocolates, and certain confectionery items. Now, Britain is also looking for more opportunities for UK services in Indian markets in segments like telecom, legal, and financial services, including banking and insurance. Remember, there are 26 chapters in the agreement, which include goods, services, investments, and intellectual property rights. Now, the bilateral trade between India and UK increased to $21.3 billion in 2023-24 from just about $20.36 billion the previous year. The average duty on goods imported from India into the UK stands at about 4.2%. And shifting focus now, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has led the Indian delegation of officials from the Department of Economic Affairs to attend the 58th annual meeting of the Board of Governors of the Asian Development Bank in Milan, Italy, starting May 4th, heading all the way to May 7th. The meeting is being attended by official delegations of the Board of Governors of the Asian Development Bank, the official delegations of ADB members, as well as international financial institutions. Remember, Finance Minister will participate in the annual meeting's focal areas like the Governor's Business Session, Governor's Plenary Session, as well as a panelist in the ADB Governor's Seminar on Cross-Border Collaboration for Future Resilience. Now, on the sidelines of the ADB's 58th annual meeting, she will also hold bilateral meetings with finance ministers from Italy, Japan, as well as Bhutan, in addition to meeting with President of the ADB, the President of the International Fund for Agriculture Development, or AFAD, and the Governor of the Japan Bank for International Cooperation. The Finance Minister will also interact with the Indian diaspora in Milan, besides meeting global think tanks, business leaders and CEOs, as well as participate in the plenary session of the next Milan Forum at the Bocconi University on balancing economic and climate resilience. Consumer electronics giant Samsung has approached the Customs, Excise and Services Tax Appellate Tribunal, challenging a penalty exceeding $500 million imposed on the company by India. The penalty issued earlier this year by Indian customs authorities is due to an alleged misclassification of telecom equipment imports, including networking gear. Now, Samsung has filed its appeal through the law firm Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan, though the petition is yet to be scheduled for a hearing. The penalty arises from the miscalculation and misclassification of equipment supplied to Reliance Jio, which resulted in a tariff discrepancy. Now remember, Samsung India reported revenues of nearly 1 lakh crore rupees for 2023-24, with its network business contributing as much as 16,600 crore rupees. And shifting focus now to the beleaguered BluSmart cab-hailing service. Now, hundreds of BluSmart driver partners have begun protests across Delhi NCR, demanding both compensation as well as alternative employment after the EV ride-hailing platform abruptly halted operations just a few weeks ago. The drivers, many of whom praised BluSmart as the best platform they've worked with, expressed frustration over the lack of formal communication from the company and clarity regarding pending payments due to them. An estimated as many as 10,000 drivers in Delhi NCR, Bengaluru and Mumbai have been affected by the shutdown of services by BluSmart. Now remember, these protests follow actions taken by the Security and Exchange Board of India against BluSmart co-founders Anmol Singh Jaggi and Puneet Singh Jaggi, who have been barred from accessing the security markets and holding board positions due to allegations of fund siphoning and document forgery in their solar EPC firm Gensol Engineering, which is closely linked to BluSmart. Now, drivers reported that they were previously paid weekly, earning as much as 8,000 in their weekly earnings and sometimes exceeding 20,000 rupees, along with additional incentives based on customer rating. However, many drivers now claim that incentives had declined in recent months, with allegations that funds were misused by the founders. Remember, BluSmart also has over 300 women drivers in the capital, many of whom are now struggling to secure new employment. Some of BluSmart's vehicles have been seized by banks or acquired by rival electric cab operators such as Eviera, even as creditors IREDA and Power Finance Corporation move to take control of these assets. Well, this could very well be an end of an era, as Berkshire Hathaway chairman and legendary investor Warren Buffett has announced on Saturday night that he will step down as the CEO at the end of this year, passing the baton to Vice Chairman of the company, Greg Abel, who's 62 years old. The surprise announcement came during the company's annual shareholder meeting in Omaha, where the 94-year-old Buffett told shareholders that it was time for new leadership. Remember, Warren Buffett, also often called the Oracle of Omaha, has led Berkshire for more than half a century, as many as 6 decades, turning it into one of the most valuable companies in the world.
Warren Buffett on Saturday said he will step down as CEO of Berkshire Hathaway at the end of the year. During the company's annual shareholder meeting in Omaha, 94-year-old Buffett said it was time for Vice Chairman Greg Abel to take over the reins. Buffett said Abel hadn't been aware of his plans prior to the announcement, though he had told his children about his decision. It caps a remarkable 60-year run where Buffett transformed Berkshire from a failing textile company into a trillion-dollar conglomerate. The company boasts nearly 200 businesses, from Geico Car Insurance to the BNSF Railroad and Dairy Queen ice cream. Buffett said he had zero intention of selling any of his Berkshire stock, nearly all of which will be donated after his death. Berkshire's ever-growing cash hoard reached over $347 billion at the end of March. The meeting comes amid a roller coaster start to the year from markets, which have reacted to uncertainty over trade policies as the Trump administration imposes tariffs. Buffett started the day by telling shareholders that trade should not be a weapon, and the United States would be better off if other countries shared its prosperity. 62-year-old Abel has been a Berkshire vice chairman since 2018.
All right, and staying with other global stories that we're tracking for you this Monday morning, oil prices have plunged more than $2 per barrel in early Asian trade today, driven by OPEC Plus's decision to speed up its oil output, which raised concerns about oversupply. Brent crude futures fell by 3.3% to just over $59 a barrel, while US West Texas Intermediate, or WTI, dropped 3.6% to about $56 per barrel. This marked the lowest level since April 9th. The decline came after OPEC Plus agreed to increase oil production by as much as 411,000 barrels per day for the month of June, continuing the trend for the months of April and May. The move raises total output hikes for the month of April, May and June put together to as much as 960,000 barrels per day. Some OPEC Plus members, including Saudi Arabia, are reportedly pushing for even faster unwinding of previous cuts to punish countries like Iraq and Kazakhstan for failing to comply with production quotas. Barclays has revised down its Brent price forecast by $4 to $66 per barrel for the year 2025 and by $2 to $60 per barrel for the year 2026, citing the accelerated output increase. Well, time for a short break right here on the Morning Brief at 9. Coming up on the other sides, Indian stock markets, how they opened and what your investment strategy should be. Mohit Gang will be here to discuss.
I need expert performance. I need my career.
In the age of OTT platforms, to watch or not to watch, that's the question. Because you are what you watch. It's our review, but your choice to skip it or stream it. Hello and welcome. I'm Krishna Kumar. This is Skip It, Stream It.
Is life transactional by any chance?
Of course. Everything in the creation affects everything else.
You are not only an actor, you are an activist.
Through my cinema, I've tried to always project what I really felt.
You tried to make women look beautiful for themselves.
The message to women was, let the spotlight of your life be on you.
You are fiercely competitive in nature, but you come across as a typical good boy that every mother would like to have.
But it doesn't mean you're not raging inside, or equally euphoric.
You have donned many hats, but who is Kiran Rao?
I am a speck and I am not even a blink in time.
From being somebody to becoming nobody is the first step in enlightenment.
Even now, I don't think of myself as a brand.
You still move ahead with your beliefs.
Winning the game is what's going to make this decision right.
It's a kind of a barometer that you have internally.
It was lovely talking to Barun.
It was great fun, and I think you'll find it fun to watch.
I found the discussion very thought-provoking.
As befits such a conversation, one goes back with more questions and answers.
He gave me a formula which I'm going to remember for the rest of my life, which is something that you'll have to watch the show for.
Watch Radico Presents Duologue with Barun Das, Season 3 at these times on News 9. News 9, English News, as it should be.
आपके वक़्फ़ में एक भी नॉन मुस्लिम नहीं आएगा.
Waqf bill was passed by Rajya Sabha. Opposition parties had challenged the legislation in the Supreme Court. What is the biggest challenge of Amit Shah in Tamil Nadu? Can Mohammad Yunus be trusted because he met Prime Minister Modi? World will come to know, India will come to know who were his handlers. West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee met thousands of teachers and educators. Tharoor said that it took 21 months for Bharatiya Janata Party to impose president rule in the state.
In a huge setback for bike taxi services in Karnataka, Tamil Nadu races ahead with 9.69% growth rate, India's fastest growing state this year. Good for Tamil Nadu. You may not be directly involved with what your son or daughter does, but your influence does work. My name is Sudha Sadanand. Welcome to the South Indian.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. Let's get you the mood check on the Indian stock markets. As the Lal Street opened just a few minutes ago, both Nifty and Sensex have a greenish start, but it seems to be just a very, very mild shade of green this morning. It's a pretty much flat scene in trading this morning. Nothing bad about that. Nifty 50 still holding well above the 24,400 level. Sensex, meanwhile, up almost 0.3%, up to over 80,787 levels, well, racing ahead perhaps to the 81,000 levels this morning. Meanwhile, remember, Bank Nifty has also been touching new highs every day. Not good mood coming in from the small cap index today. It is a little bit in the red. Meanwhile, volatility is also a little higher this morning at about 18.5 or so. Let's look at the Nifty 50 heat map and see if there are certain alarm bells or positive shoots that we should be aware of in trading this morning. Well, Kotak Bank is down about 4.3%. That's a big fall for Kotak Bank this morning. SBI also down, meanwhile, 1.2%. Meanwhile, the IT pack is doing well today. TCS is up about 1%. Infosys is up about 0.8%. HCL Tech also up about 1% or so. Let's move to the consumer durable space. M&M is up about 1.2% in trade this morning. Meanwhile, Tata Motors is also up about 1% or so. Remember, these are the stocks that had taken a massive beating and a massive price correction in the wake of tariffs on Indian auto and automobile sector imposed by Donald Trump. Meanwhile, it's a low news day. It seems there isn't too much action here in the markets, and neither do there seem to be any more of the global triggers arising from the US. Mohit Gang joins me this morning to make sense of what's going on in the Indian markets and the mood on the street this morning. Mohit, good morning. Pleasure having you back with us on News 9. A quiet weekend, not too many triggers. Donald Trump has not really come out with too many weekend announcements. What's your assessment of the mood of the market this morning, Mohit?
Yeah. Hi. Morning, Karthik. And I think it's a quiet start to the month of May, as you rightly put it out. Look, honestly, I think from a Trump perspective, there are a few announcements which keep coming here and there, which is that I think he's trying and making a point that China is too keen on negotiating and they're suffering, and as in there's a lot of pain in the economy. And so I think the indications are that he will arrive, or perhaps US might just blink first and arrive at a conclusion with the Chinese in terms of the trade negotiations. So that kind of augurs well for the global economy. However, if that is delayed, I think the chances of recession keep increasing with every single day passing by. Right. So, and it's just not US, it's also China. So put together both the economies, if they go under any form of recession, then I think the global economy is up for a toss. So that's from a US perspective. From an Indian perspective, honestly, I think the flows have been very steady. FIIs seem to be finding way back home. And I think that's more to do with the global scenario, because US now looks more like a place from where the flows are coming out. Because the FIIs are not so clear as to where to invest in US markets, and China, of course, is not on their radar right now. So the third biggest economy, the third biggest play then becomes India, which is relatively safer, though the valuations might still be a little high from an FII perspective. But I think from a safety perspective, Indian markets offer them that free entry and exit, and perhaps a steady regime of political outlook also. So I think from that perspective, India looks pretty steady and stable.
Right, so India is looking pretty stable, especially for FIIs, but I want to stay just a little bit longer with Donald Trump's tariffs, as well as, the commentary which is coming in on the state of affairs for the US economy. Now, Ray Dalio has said that there could be a recession or something even worse than a recession for the US. And meanwhile, Donald Trump over the weekend, if you remember, Mohit, is also pretty clear that American children should go and buy fewer toys, perhaps be happy with $2 instead of 30. So not really underpinning the importance of inflation and how US inflation will stack up if supply from China reduces in the US market. And then overall high inflation, low growth could potentially lead to recession, or as Ray Dalio said, maybe something even worse than recession. So if that is something that Donald Trump does take the US economy towards, then what is the kind of implication it will happen on, on foreign flows, foreign investments? Do you see a scenario where more money will likely flow into the Indian market, or US goes into recession and becomes a problem for everybody else?
Well, look, I think two parts to it, Karthik. Honestly, I think there is no denying the fact that US gradually is inching towards recession with every passing day, as I mentioned. The probability keeps increasing. And I think the data will start coming out from next quarter onwards. But my sense is this financial year, US will show all signs of recession until something dramatic is done to reverse the entire tariff war scenario, which I don't think so is likely, right? I think Trump in his heart knows that it's a long game, and perhaps he's willing to play that game given the statements which he's making. It looks like that he's willing to park himself for a pretty long game out there, right? And a long game will mean global recession, and especially US recession. So that's there. But yes, in terms of destination, as I mentioned, India looks extremely attractive. Look, the interest rate regime is coming off in India. The liquidity scenario is looking pretty good. Inflation is well under control. The headline macros are pretty much looking very nice and neat. The economy is growing steady between 6 to 6.5%. Right. So all those check boxes are pretty much ticked out here. The only thing which can perhaps derail the Indian scenario is a longish skirmish with the neighbor, which also I don't think so. There is a huge probability. There is definitely a possibility of a retaliatory action and then a retaliatory action and so on and so forth. But I don't think so. Longish skirmish kind of awaits us. So if we are pretty much done with it in a month or so, then I think we are up on track, and I think the economy should start looking up. And even if the economy doesn't show great signs of revival, I think the global flows will keep finding India as a safer destination, as I said, because after US and China, the third market for them is India, with slightly attractive returns and better macros. So I think India kind of in the pecking order then scales up beyond US and China both.
All right. So, talking about the skirmish and the potential, breakout of some military operations on the border, Mohit, what are the markets factoring in right now? Are the markets factoring in just a day or two of a skirmish like we had seen during Balakot or the Uri surgical strike? Or are we looking at something, are the markets looking at something a little more prolonged this time? What are investors factoring in at these levels?
Look, honestly, I don't think so. Markets are looking at something dramatic this time here. Barring the 1 or 2 days of red in the market when the incident actually happened in Pahalgam, there has been no sign in the market of abatement. As in, market doesn't look like it is factoring in too much of action out there. It's perhaps will be a more calibrated measure and more diplomatic and measures which are on the sideline but not directly military actions, and which I think the Indian government has been taking. Every day you get a news flow which says that there is the ports are closed, the airspace is closed, the postal services are closed, so on and so forth, right? So the diplomatic measures are on, which I think will get more severe as days pass by. But I don't think so that impacts Indian economy too much. The import and export getting curbed from Pakistan is barely a dent in the Indian economy. Right, so markets I think are pretty much good with the event. I think, but though markets would like the event to get done with, and that's where we don't have clarity as of now. So which is what all of us are waiting. And once the event is done, I think we can then see a significant move up in the market.
All right, and beyond perhaps India's potential response to the Pahalgam terrorist attacks, are there any other domestic factors that markets should await? Because it seems recession in the US may not hit. We don't know external factors, global factors, but on the domestic front, inflation seems to now be under control. RBI has gone ahead and cut interest rates again in the last MPC, and more or less the earnings season of Q4 is also over, at least for the large companies. What are the next immediate factors that investors should watch out for to decide on their future course of investments?
Look, I think a couple of things from my perspective. I think monsoon remains the biggest thing as we head into the season, and how does the overall rain scenario pan out pan country is something which we will have to check. That's point number one. Point number two is the US-India trade deal and the India-Europe FTA. I think those are two things which can be of significant importance. Honestly, I think those are landmark things. If they happen within next quarter or even if in this calendar year, I think these will be massive turnaround points for the economy as a whole. And these are as large developments as perhaps the 91 liberalization kind of a thing, right? So if we click a trade deal with the two biggest trading blocks of the world, which is the European Union and the US, then I think we have a long way to go, and we have a very robust, steady path ahead of us. So from my perspective, I think these are the most important things which I'm watching out for. Though I'm pretty much not sure on the timelines of these. These are massive negotiating points. Correct. And will perhaps take a lot of time to iron it out. But yeah, I think that's it. And one more point, Karthik, which I want to add to my commentary is that if you look at crude oil, right? India might just be India might just suffer if US and China go into recession. But look at where the crude oil is today at sub 60, which is at $59. I think that's a significant boon for Indian economy. Honestly, if crude remains in this level for next 3-6 months, then we are any which ways looking very good on the fiscal side of ours. So I think all in all, the macros are looking pretty positive now.
All right. And yeah, the commentary which is coming, Mohit, from Barclays at least, is that crude for this year, the year 2025, is being factored in at $66, and that'll move sharply down to 60 for the year 2026. So if crude continues to be in this range, it seems that not just 2025, but 2025 and 2026 could both be good years for India. I just want to end by asking you one more question specific to tariffs and the negotiations with US that you mentioned. Of course, these are hard negotiations and one doesn't really know the timelines of closure. But in case US was to get its way around by India lowering some tariffs, of course, one level of the argument is that it will bode well for the Indian consumers, because a lot of imported goods into India will technically become cheaper. But then this also raises competition for domestic producers of similar goods, thereby perhaps corporate earnings in India could take a beating going forward as way of India reducing its tariffs to negotiate a deal with the US. Is that a fair assumption and fear, Mohit?
I would say yes, Karthik. Look, there's always a give and take in any kind of trade negotiation, right? And India will have to concede some inches. India runs a trade surplus with US, and perhaps US will look at evening that out, which means India will have to import perhaps larger quantity of crude oil and few other things from US, which India has already started. And maybe a significant portion of that will come from defense imports. I think India, even if India turns around the needle on defense imports from, let's say, a Russia or a France or somewhat other European countries to, let's say, US a little bit, I think that will just balance out the trade thing with US, and which is what US is looking for. My sense is even US as an economy wants to send a signal out to the global world that they are closing negotiations with larger economies, right? And they are getting an ace up on larger economies, and perhaps they want to showcase India as the first example globally of a large country which has kind of come on the table and signed a deal. And from an Indian perspective, I think it's a win-win. India needs US as a backer geopolitically also, and India needs US to back it up in terms of flows and many other things. So my sense is India-US trade deal, the sooner it happens, will be a great sign for both the economies, and I'm just hoping and keeping my fingers crossed that this happens in next 3 to 6 months.
All right, Mohit. Well, let's do hope that this does happen in the next 3 to 6 months. Thank you so much for joining us here on News 9 this morning, Mohit Gang.
Pleasure. Thanks.
And now let's move on to some of the other global stories that we're tracking for you this Monday morning. Let's look at the top 9 global stories lined up for you today. US President Donald Trump authorizes a 100% tariff on all foreign films, calls for return of movie production to the United States to protect the US economy. Warren Buffett will step down as the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway by the end of this year. Greg Abel, the vice chairman, has been named as successor after 6 decades at the helm. US stocks rise for second consecutive week, driven by strong job data, easing trade tensions and expectations of a steady Fed policy. Meanwhile, US job growth slows in the month of April amid tariff uncertainty, with healthcare driving gains and manufacturing struggling as economic outlook worsens under Trump's trade policies. And it's goodbye to Skype. Microsoft has shut down Skype after 2 decades, shifting focus to MS Teams amid rival growth and smartphone era challenges. Australia's Anthony Albanese wins historic second term as Prime Minister, driven by voters' concerns over Donald Trump's influence and local issues like cost of living pressures. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Russia has enough strength to finish Ukraine war on its own terms, denies need for nuclear weapons as drone strikes injure civilians. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky discusses air defense and sanctions with Donald Trump at Vatican as Russia demands clear response on ceasefire amid drone strikes injuring civilians in Kharkiv and other locations. Donald Trump has sparked an outrage with AI-generated image of himself as Pope days after attending Pope Francis's funeral and joking he would like to be Pope one day. These stories and more you're watching Morning Brief at 9.
Every brand tells a story. And they are the storytellers, the Sutradhars. They present a brand with band, baja and barat to you. They are the Brandwalas.
In a huge setback for bike taxi services in Karnataka, Tamil Nadu races ahead with 9.69% growth rate, India's fastest growing state this year. Good for Tamil Nadu. You may not be directly involved with what your son or daughter does, but your influence does. My name is Sudha Sadanan. Welcome to the South Indian.
You're watching News 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. In a major move, US President Donald Trump has announced sweeping new trade measures targeting the global film industry. Now, taking to his Truth Social platform, Trump said he has authorized the Department of Commerce and US trade representatives to begin the process of imposing a 100% tariff on all movies produced outside the United States of America. Trump accused foreign governments of luring American studios overseas with generous incentives, calling it both an economic and national security threat. He said, and I quote, "We want movies made in America again." Trump said the latest move is meant to push film production back onto US soil. And Wall Street closed the week on Friday on a high note, with stocks advancing for a second straight week. Investors were encouraged by strong economic data and signs of a possible easing in trade tensions between the US and China. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose about 1.4%, while both the S&P 500 and NASDAQ gained around 1.5% each. Take a look.
U.S. stocks advanced on Friday, notching the second straight week of gains, helped by strong economic data and potential easing of trade tensions between the U.S. and China. The Dow added roughly 1.4%, while the S&P 500 and NASDAQ climbed about 1.5% each. The U.S. economy added 177,000 jobs in April, exceeding expectations, while the unemployment rate held steady at 4.2%. The data helped to assuage concerns of an economic slowdown following a Commerce Department report showing a contraction in U.S. gross domestic product for the first time in 3 years, weighed down by a tariff-induced flood of imports. Chris Brigatti, Chief Investment Officer with SWBC, says the jobs report will convince the Federal Reserve to keep interest rates on hold at its meeting next week.
With regard to the Fed and where they stand with the current jobs report, I do expect them to be allowed to kick the can down the road a little bit again. They've been very direct, and Chair Powell has been very forceful with regard to his expectation that they need more data and they can be patient with their approach. He's touted his independence and the Fed's independence as a policy-setting mechanism, and I think they continue to have that bandwidth to be able to determine where they want to be.
Also, China said on Friday that it was evaluating an offer from the U.S. to hold talks over President Donald Trump's 145% tariffs, which he had imposed on Chinese imports. The tit-for-tat tariffs between the world's two largest economies have kept investors on edge, with both sides unwilling to be seen backing down. Stocks on the move included Apple, which fell nearly 4%, after the iPhone maker trimmed its share buyback program by $10 billion, and CEO Tim Cook told analysts that tariffs could add about $900 million in costs this quarter. And shares of Take-Two Interactive dropped more than 6.5%, after the video game maker delayed the release of Grand Theft Auto 6 to May 2026.
U.S. job growth showed signs of slowing in the month of April, with a slight dip in new hires as employees continued to hold on to workers. The latest data revealed a slight revision to March's job numbers, but the unemployment rate remained steady at 4.2%. While the labor market is still holding strong, the question now is how long that can last amid the ongoing trade tensions in the U.S. Take a look.
U.S. job growth slowed marginally in April, but the outlook for the labor market is increasingly darkening as President Donald Trump's aggressive tariff policy heightens economic uncertainty. Non-farm payrolls increased by 177,000 jobs last month, which was better than expected. Though March's number was revised lower, the unemployment rate remained at 4.2%. This helped to assuage fears that the economy was close to recession, after a report from the Commerce Department showed the U.S. economy contracted in the first quarter, amid a tariff-induced flood of imports. Nonetheless, it is too early for the labor market to show the impact of Trump's on and off again tariff policy. Friday's solid jobs report gives the Federal Reserve cover to keep interest rates unchanged at its meeting next week. Healthcare continued to dominate job growth, adding 51,000 positions across hospitals and ambulatory services. Transportation and warehousing employment increased by 29,000, but federal government employment declined by 9,000 and is down 26,000 since January, amid the Trump administration's unprecedented and often chaotic campaign, spearheaded by tech billionaire Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, to drastically shrink the government. Manufacturing payrolls also declined, reflecting the strain from the tariffs. Trump's Liberation Day tariff announcement ushered in sweeping duties on most imports from the United States' trade partners, sparking a trade war with China and tightening financial conditions. Trump later delayed higher reciprocal tariffs for 90 days, which economists said was essentially a pause on the whole economy, as it left businesses in a state of paralysis and risked a recession if there was no clarity soon. Meanwhile, business sentiment continues to plummet, which economists expect will at some point give way to layoffs.
All right, now from the Federal Reserve policy meeting to trade and inflation figures from China. These are the stories to watch in business and finance in this week ahead. Take a look.
Fed is widely expected to hold rates on Wednesday, following data showing a contraction in first quarter U.S. GDP. The focus will be on when it might resume its easing cycle and whether June is a live meeting for policy action. Trump has repeatedly criticized Fed policy and Chief Jerome Powell, fueling concerns about the central bank's independence. Investors will monitor trade data from China on May 9th, the first reading since Trump's 145% levies on most Chinese goods took effect. Inflation figures are due the following day. A prolonged battle with deflation is probably the last thing Beijing wants as it braces for a protracted trade war. The UK is seeing some unusually positive trends as tariff terror grips most of the world. The sterling is scaling 3-month highs against the dollar. The FTSE All-Share Index jumped 10% in 4 weeks, and rate cut expectations are high. Nearly all traders expect the Bank of England to cut borrowing costs by 1/4 point on Thursday. It's a complex picture for emerging market central bankers, navigating the trade war and ensuing inflation effects as well as a weaker dollar. While most rate setters ponder when they can cut again, Brazil's central bank chief has confirmed a hike is likely next week. Meanwhile, the mood has become more dovish in Poland, where lower-than-expected inflation pressures have led a growing number of policymakers to signal that the cost of credit may fall sooner rather than later.
All right, and Skype will ring for the last time today as owner Microsoft readies the 2-decade-old internet calling service that redefined how people connect across borders. Now, according to the software giant, shutting down Skype will help Microsoft focus on its other homegrown MS Teams service by simplifying its communication offerings. Now, founded in 2003, Skype's audio and video calls quickly disrupted the landline industry in the early 2000s and made the company a household name, boasting hundreds of millions of users at its peak. But the platform has struggled to keep up with easier to use and more reliable rivals, including Zoom and Salesforce Slack in recent years. Now, the decline was partly because Skype's core technology was not suited for the smartphone era. The ease of transition from the platform, its users will be able to log into Teams for free on any supported device using their existing credentials, with chats and contacts migrating automatically. Australia's Anthony Albanese has secured a historic second term as Prime Minister following a dramatic comeback against the once resurgent Conservative opposition. This victory was largely driven by voter concerns about the influence of US President Donald Trump on Australian policies. Albanese is the first Australian Prime Minister to win a consecutive 3-year term in 2 decades.
Today, the Australian people have voted for Australian values.
Australia's Anthony Albanese has claimed a historic second term as Prime Minister. It's a dramatic comeback for the Labour leader, powered by voters' concerns about the influence of US President Donald Trump. Addressing cheering crowds at Labour Party headquarters in Sydney, Albanese said the country had chosen the Australian way.
Because we are proud of who we are and all that we have built together in this country. We do not need to beg or borrow or copy from anywhere else. We do not seek our inspiration overseas. We find it right here in our values and in our people.
He is the first Australian Prime Minister to win a consecutive 3-year term in 2 decades. While Peter Dutton, the leader of the Conservative Liberal Party, conceded defeat and the loss of his own seat in Parliament that he had held for 2 decades.
Thank you. Now, we didn't do well enough during this campaign. That much is obvious tonight, and I accept full responsibility for that. Earlier on, I called the Prime Minister to congratulate him on his success tonight. It's an historic occasion for the Labor Party, and we recognise that.
The Liberals had previously led the opinion polls, but Dutton, a former policeman with a reputation for being tough on crime and immigration, became dogged by his perceived ideological closeness to Donald Trump. Earlier in the day, voters said Trump's volatile policies, along with cost of living pressures and welfare issues, were among their top concerns.
I think what's scary about Trump is what it world can become very quickly if everyone goes that way.
Well, I feel like the cost of living and also childcare, because that's a key issue. I find there needs to be more teachers.
I think what's most important to me is a kinder, more thoughtful and compassionate society.
Australia is one of the world's few democracies with mandatory voting for their 18 million eligible voters. Many marked Election Day with the ritual of having a so-called democracy sausage, dressing in swimwear.
Russian President Vladimir Putin says Russia has the strength to take its war in Ukraine to what he called its logical conclusion, though he hopes nuclear weapons won't be needed. His remarks come more than 3 years into Moscow's full-scale invasion, which Russia claims has not deliberately targeted civilians.
Russia has the strength and resources to finish its operation in Ukraine, President Vladimir Putin said in remarks published on Sunday, coming as Russian drones struck homes in Kyiv overnight, according to Ukrainian officials. They said children were among those injured, and released videos said to show the central city of Cherkasy, saying it was also attacked. Reuters could not verify the location or date of the footage. Moscow has denied targeting civilians after it began a full-scale invasion of Ukraine more than 3 years ago. In a state TV documentary aired on Sunday about the Russian president, Putin was asked about the risk of nuclear escalation. They wanted to provoke us so that we made mistakes, Putin said. There has been no need to use those weapons, he added, and I hope they will not be required. The president also said his country has, quote, enough strength and means to bring what was started in 2022 to a logical conclusion with the outcome Russia requires. The carefully choreographed film was released as the Kremlin announced that China's President Xi Jinping will make an official visit to Russia next week. He'll be taking part in the 80th anniversary celebrations marking the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II. Russian armed forces were seen holding rehearsals on Saturday ahead of a massive military parade set for May the 9th. Putin has proposed a 3-day ceasefire with Ukraine around the anniversary. In a social media post on Sunday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called it top-level cynicism, saying, quote, the Russians are calling for a ceasefire while striking Ukraine every single day, with thousands of drone and bomb attacks launched this week alone. Zelensky, who was in Prague on Sunday to meet his Czech counterpart, has said he is ready for a truce if it would last at least a month. But Putin has ruled that out in the near term, saying he wants a long-term settlement, not a brief pause.
And in a move that has stirred a mix of shock, offense and amusement, US President Donald Trump has posted an AI-generated image of himself dressed as the Pope, just days before cardinals gather in Rome to choose a new leader of the Catholic Church. Trump, who isn't Catholic, shared the digitally altered image on his Truth Social platform shortly after attending Pope Francis's funeral. The White House also reposted it on X. While reactions in Rome range from outrage to eye rolls, many see it as Trump being Trump. Listen in to what Trump had to say.
As Pope? I'd like to be Pope. That would be my number one choice. No, I don't know. I have no preference. I must say we have a cardinal that happens to be out of a place called New York who's very good. So we'll see what happens.
And we leave you with that on this edition of Morning Brief at 9. Remember, news and updates will continue on the other side. Keep watching News 9.
आपके वक़्फ़ में